So I just went out for a coffee, and on the way home, I was reflecting on this idea that I thought I might share. So it's this idea that the mind tries to run ahead of life. So the mind tries to run ahead of the flow. Because I was thinking about it in the context of even this channel, this YouTube channel, which I recently started to continue it. And on my way home, I was reflecting on different video ideas that I could make. And while that's fine, of course, especially if it happens naturally, the trouble with it is that the reality is that I don't know what I'll be, inspired to talk about tomorrow, or in a week, or in a month, or in a year, or if I'll be inspired to talk about anything. So I was just reminded of this insight that I had a long time ago as well, that the mind, the egoic mind, tries to run ahead of life, ahead of the flow, rather than slow down, surrender, and actually be carried by the flow. Because the mind seems to exist almost in a different space than the unfolding of life here in this physical reality, you could say, it can abstract reality. It can think ahead, right? It can go back as well and reflect. But unless those activities are done as a natural part of the flow, where you feel inspired and moved to think ahead and kind of have some ideas and plans and dreams and aspirations, unless those things are happening naturally versus as a process of grasping at the future, they are not very pleasant, and they're not actually very helpful, especially if they are, you think about the future and you dream about the future, and then you're attached to those things actually happening, and you're forced to use effort to make them happen. So you try to be disciplined and strategic and motivated and try to manufacture motivation, which makes sense at a certain level of development, but no longer does when we begin to see the limitations of that. And we begin to move from the empowerment paradigm to the surrender paradigm. In a very early video, some years ago, I talked about the three paradigms: the paradigm of survival, of success / empowerment, and the paradigm of surrender. And they are kind of like a natural growth process that souls go through. And what I'm trying to describe in this video, like on this channel as well, is the movement from the paradigm of empowerment, where the mind feels separate from life and tries to make it happen, to the paradigm of surrender, where it recognizes itself as an aspect of life and recognizes its own limitations, its own insecurity, its own ignorance, and also the intelligence of life, the wisdom of life. So it's almost like the intellect surrenders to the intelligence of life, where you could say, the small mind surrenders to life's mind, to the great mind, to the logos. My logic gives up to the logos, right? It gives up to the divine. So, the thing about this insight that I was trying to share at the beginning of this video, and we're trying to develop right now, is that there is no need actually for the egoic mind to run ahead of life. It can slow down and recognize itself as part of the current of life, like a river, and be carried. And that's when we, or the mind as well, ends up flowing in tune with life, in tune with Tao. And things that are rising and emerging naturally, they're not forced, there's no need for effort to make life happen. You are synchronized with life's current and also life's energy. And when the timing is right, the right things happen. As I described in a previous video, life functions almost by the law of relevance, which means the right experience at the right time. So when the mind surrenders and doesn't run ahead of life, relevance remains. So the right thing happens at the right time. And then, there's no need to think about the future as an effort and try to plan it and try to be attached to it happening. And it's much wiser, and that's what the mind, the spiritually developing ego eventually recognizes, that it's much wiser and smarter to become humble, in a sense, to surrender, to give up its efforts and its grasping, and again, be lived, be carried. Which actually reminds me of a story. I was in Spain some years back, and I was driving my car there, my mother's car, and there was a problem with parking when you come home and you have to park in front of the building, the apartment building. There was usually no space around the area. So that creates a lot of anxiety usually in me and my mother. And I was away, right, driving the car, and I recognized at some point that I'm trying to, because of this circumstance, I was trying to park the car before I was even home. So I was trying to park the car in my head without actually being at the location, which was so, just naive almost. It just made no sense because I didn't have the conditions. Maybe I would drive home and the right parking spot would be available right in front of the apartment building. Maybe not. But it makes no sense to be away from home and then try to quote unquote park the car, try to solve a problem without actually being in front of the actual situation. So it's the same with life, it's the same with the flow of life. And even with these videos, although I might have different ideas and things that I want to talk about, those ideas can be kind of like sitting in an abstract realm, almost like the Platonic idea of like in the Platonic realm of ideas. And when the time comes, one of those ideas might come down and it move me to talk about it or not. But there's no need to think about those or try to plan them out, or because who knows, I may think, for example, that I want to talk about this tomorrow. Well, but tomorrow I may not feel the energy and the inspiration to talk about that idea. I might not want to talk about anything at all or about something else. So what I'm trying to describe here is that when you flow in tune with life, there's no need to plan ahead unless planning happens by itself. But even that is held very lightly. So, and it's the same with projects and the same with work and creativity. When a project is meant to happen, it will also reflect where you are at that point in your journey. That's when our creativity is also aligned, is in tune with the Tao. It's kind of like, I'm reminded of an article of a writer who used to write articles and books, and all throughout her career, she was writing about what was going on in her life at the time. And when I saw that documentary about her life, I forget her name right now, but it was such a beautiful example of how someone flows in tune with the Tao and her creativity is in tune with the Tao. So that's how I believe the right work should be for us. It should be the work that is relevant to us at that point in time. How do we know whether something is relevant? Because we feel like doing it, because we feel excited by it, we feel inspired by it, we feel, yeah, we wouldn't want to be doing anything else other than that at that moment. So yeah, it's another example of life lived in tune with the Tao. It feels aligned to us at the time. So all that to say that you can lean back and be carried by the river, and there's no need to actually run ahead. It's better to just discover what will want to happen. In a few hours, in a few days, in a few years. So surrender and be carried.